Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football.
Hey Seahawks fans, welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, here to talk Seahawks football. Today's going to be a fun show for us because it's kind of wonkish, if you will. It's talking about statistics. We're trying to look into the crystal ball, into the future a little bit, and come up with our statistical performance predictions on the offense and defense. We're going to key in on some individual players. We're going to do some total offense, total defense kind of stats, kind of find out exactly what we think we're going to be, what level we're going to be performing at this season. Welcome in.
Yeah, I think this will be a fun show. We'll see. I mean, this is one of those things, I think there'll be some debate here because of, where do we expect the yards to come from? Where do we expect the catches to go? Those kind of things. Because you can't just predict individuals. You got to kind of think of it as a team. Because
that's true.
If Jackson Smith and Jigma gets what you and I both think, which is at least I think it's what we both think, is a bunch of catches, even for a rookie, then obviously he's the people who he's replacing, he's taking those, but there's an extra 20, 25 catches. Who are those being taken from? And so I think that'll be interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's an interesting way to take a look at this and kind of spread things out a little bit and really dig into our expectation levels. And for me, I found a couple of surprises when I kind of dug into this, and based on my own predictions, it looks like we're going to have a stellar season. So I want to throw the caution out there a little bit in that these are my, I would think these are my ceiling predictions, more or less, like where I believe that we can get to.
Yeah. So I tried to be, kind of realistic based on, past, just history of both the Seahawks and just in general. What can you expect from a rookie wide receiver? What can you expect from a rookie running back? And historically, if we go with a rookie running back, you can just expect them to be good.
Yeah.
There's not really a lot of like adding to, like waiting for them to get better.
I would say that even though these are kind of ceiling looks, I think that these are kind of realistic, especially on the offensive side. I think I had to dig a little bit on the defensive side to kind of forecast where they're gonna be, and wanted to see a little bit of improvement there. So I kind of built that in. But on offense, it's really pretty straightforward. You take a look at last year's stats, you extrapolate a little bit into the future. You create a little bit more efficiency in the offense, a little bit more attempts here and there, and pretty soon these things kind of stack up. So let's just get right into it. Let's start with Geno Smith, because really that's the head of the monster. The offense is going to go in the direction that Geno Smith goes. If Geno Smith struggles and has a bad season, this offense is going to struggle. If he has the same season or better, slightly better than last year, I think this offense really clicks, and it turns into a pretty special season. And I've got him down for improving on attempts from, let's see, I can't remember where he's at, but you said you had last season's stats up.
Yeah,
so I've got him at,
he had 572 attempts last year.
Yeah, and I've got him at 600. So it's just a bump. And the reason it's not like exponentially more is because of our running back situation for me, and our improved line blocking, having more third down conversions, et cetera, and having some of those go to running backs. So I think overall he's more efficient. So he gets a little bump in his attempts, and then completions at 425. I've got him. I think he was at 399. And then completion percentage, I bumped him from like 68.9 to 71. So he gets that 70% threshold for me. 4,600 yards which is about
46. Wow.
350 more than the year prior. But if you take a look at the drop off that he had last season, I don't think this is completely out of the question if he's consistent throughout the season, plus the additional weapons that he's got. 36 touchdowns. He had 30 last year, if I remember correctly. He had 11 interceptions last year, if I remember correctly, and 15 interceptions this season is my prediction, only because of those
Ooh.
extra attempts. And I think he's going to be taking a few more shots because I think based on where we're at and being ahead in games and just kind of the way that things will click, I think that he's going to have a few more attempts that are into tight windows. So
See,
all in all,
it,
though, you take a look at that. That's a Pro Bowl season for sure.
it
Puts him in the
is.
conversation um, for some other awards and gets
Not with
them
15
deeper into the
interceptions.
playoffs. Yeah, you know.
So when I was looking at this, I kind of I want to say I went in the opposite direction. Not that I predicted him to do worse, but that I predicted that if you're in the lead more, you're going to run more. And if you can run the ball effectively and efficiently more, you're going to run more. Um, and so the 399 attempts that he had last year, I'm like, let's just leave it at 400. Let's just leave it right there. Um, and then I started, I started doing the running back stuff. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to move Smith stuff down. Um,
So I'm going to stop you right there. So last year, I think you're right. There's definitely a lot of room there in the running back room to improve because last year we were ranked 22nd in attempts, 18th in yards, and 22nd in
mhm.
touchdowns as a running back group as a whole. And so there is definitely some room there, and I could totally see that. I really could.
So yeah, so I ended up backing it down to 350 completions
Hmm.
overall. But that came from um, partly having only 550 attempts. So um, which actually led to a lower completion percentage, and I didn't really like that. But it's just the numbers that came up. Um, And so, but overall, it was touchdowns, instead of 30, I was thinking 35, and interceptions instead of 11, I had him at 12. And so I only had him up an uptick a little bit, but yeah, fewer attempts, fewer yards, or not fewer attempts, fewer completions, more touchdowns. But for yards, I said 4,300.
Yeah.
So on fewer attempts and fewer completions, more yards. And
Okay.
that's
So
really where I think this is gonna happen.
let's explain that a little bit because mine's kind of self evident. He's got more attempts, more completions, a higher percentage just based on the efficiency of the offense. He's going to get more opportunities, I think, because the offense is going to be out there more. That's for me. That's why I threw those attempts up. But you're saying that the running backs take that. So what's the consequences of your stats?
So, here's the reason why. Yards per reception for DK Metcalf last year were only 11.6. That's the lowest of his career. And for Lockett, it was 12.3, which I believe was the second lowest of his career. And a lot of that had to do with the offense and the way it was designed because they couldn't block up the middle. So that was a lot of short completions, a lot of very quick plays, quick passes, and they didn't take a lot of shots downfield. As opposed to the Russell Wilson years where they were
Yeah.
taking a lot of deep shots. Um, where this time it was a lot more methodical. I think that they're going to be in situations where they're going to have um, you're going to have more options on offense. You're going to have people open deep, and he's going to take those shots. He's going to have um, where teams pull both safeties back because of Seattle's speed, trying to protect it, and that leaves people open in the middle um, for for decent gains.
Chunk
12,
plays.
yeah.
Right.
And so rather than swinging the ball out for a 4 or 5 yard reception, he can dump it off over the middle to JSN for 11. And so you're going to end up with just a lot more efficiency in terms of yards per pass.
Yeah.
And so that's really where that came from, for me.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's why I had his interceptions up just slightly because I did think that based on everything I'm looking at, not just Geno Smith stats, but everyone else, and you step back a little bit, you can see that there's an opportunity for completion percentage increase just because the efficiency goes up, but also those interceptions could go up too. That's why I had them at 15. Because I
Mm-hmm.
do agree with you. I think that the shots down the field, over the middle, for larger chunk plays happen this year, for a variety of reasons. I think, if you take a look at Njigba coming in and Charbonnet, those two additions, I think, really do impact this roster because you're going to get a lot more out of those guys at those backup spots, those rotation spots, that third right receiver that we've had in the past. And that's going to just open things up for Geno. So I agree with you in that, you could go either way. This
Mm-hmm.
offense could click so much in the passing game, and it's so easy to pick up yards. If Njigba has kind of a rookie Pro Bowl level season, that Geno's attempts and completions and completion percentage and touchdown and yards all go up. But you're right. If we end up going into the third, fourth quarter with 10 to 17 point leads in most games, you can see us really starting to ride that running back room.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, it could be both, actually. It could be both. We could completely go out and just tear off leads in almost every game and then go to the running back room
Mm-hmm.
later in games. And I think my stats that I'm going to walk through with the running backs kind of show that we are doing both, and we end up with an elevated level of total yards on offense over last year because of that.
Well, the team was ninth in yards last year, which is good, but I don't think anywhere near where you and I are both expecting them to be.
Agreed.
This year. I mean, they were one of the top offenses, and then there was a stretch kind of in there where the offensive line forgot how to block, and the defense, and the offense started to struggle a little bit. Um, and if they can avoid that swoon, in the third quarter of the season, which is kind of where it happened last year, then uh, they're gonna be better, and just think the talent overall is better on offense this year, so they should be, you know, higher up. There should in the rankings, they should have more yards. It should be a better offense, and overall, but
And I'll get to
yeah.
my total yards and total ranking, at
Mhm.
the end of this conversation for the offense. But why don't you start with the running game, because you talked about how running backs would impact Geno Smith's stats this year.
Well, so looking at last year, right? Walker had 1,050 yards and 9 touchdowns. Good year for the rookie. Penny added 346 yards, but only 2 touchdowns, and that was in only 5 games. And then before his injury, and then he was out for the rest of the year. And so when I look at that, and now you're going to have you still got Walker. He's still going to do his thing, but now you've got Charbonnet in there, who's going to be a much more available player, and give them really a two-man rotation all season rather than it being just Walker for most of the year. And I could see that helping both players, and it's really what it's going to help the offense. So if Walker ends up with um, 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns, which is a slight improvement in yards and one less touchdown. I think that is very doable. But that is with um, Charbonnet in there. And instead of Penny's 350 yards and 2, we're talking like 700 yards and 6. And so we're talking about an additional like 400 yards
Yeah.
of running, because you've got a capable number two. And of course, you can take those yards and you can redistribute them if you
hmm
think that, which I know you do. You think Charbonnet will take over the number one spot by the end of the
Well,
year.
I was
So,
conservative. I'll say this, nonetheless, improved over last year. I had Ken Walker at 235 attempts, slightly up,
mhm.
1,175 yards. So I've got 75 yards more than you predicted. 11 touchdowns, a little bit more. I also had him at 40 receptions, 210 yards. So a little uptick in the receptions out of the backfield for Ken Walker as well. So great season. Not spectacular because he's sharing the load, but
Mhm.
solid, very solid. Zach Charbonnet, I had him at 125 attempts, 575 yards, 7 touchdowns. So I had one more touchdown than you, less yards, but adding 35 receptions for 200 yards. Overall, that's still, what is it, 400 yards more.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about the redistribution there. That's 400 yards more than last year, combined with those two backs. Now we're going to get a few more with Ken McIntosh, DJ Dallas, etc. But that right there adds huge stability to that offense as far as being able to convert on third downs, raise that third down conversion rate from, let's just say it's 46, 47% all the way up close to 50, 51%, which would be top 5 in the league. And I definitely see that with this offense. And I think it extrapolates all the way down the line. So if we go to wide receivers, I've got Tyler Lockett not losing too many receptions, but he's down a little bit to 75 for 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns. I've got DK Metcalf at 95 receptions. I think he leads the team in receptions, bumps it up a little bit to 1,150 yards, 10 touchdowns, comes up statistically all the way across. Jackson Smith and Jigba, this is the wild card for me on the whole offense. I've got him at 65 receptions for 700 yards and 7 touchdowns because of the role he's going to play in this scheme. His role is going to, and if he turns out, now nobody knows, right? He hasn't taken a down in the NFL, but if he turns out the way that I believe that they want to have him operate, his role is going to be to extend drives, to be a third down converter. I would imagine that 45% of his receptions are on third down conversions for Geno, if Geno builds that rapport and that trust with him. And so the sky's the limit for me on Njigba in this offense, the way that it's constructed, because if he has that sort of season and Charbonnet has the season that I just laid out, this offense is potent, very potent.
Mm-hmm. See, I looked at it and you're just like, you bumped everything. I said that Metcalf went from 90 receptions to 85, but that his yards went from 1048 to 1200.
Yeah.
So he's going to get an extra 150
That's
yards
entirely possible too. That
on
outlook
5
right there.
fewer catches, because his average last year was 11.6 and it needs to be up over 14.
And Geno is one of the best deep passers in the game. He really is.
He really threw some nice deep balls last year. Same kind of with Lockett, as I have him going from 84 and 1033 to 80 and 1050. So kind of about the same. But it jumps his yards per attempt up over 13, back where it used to be. He almost always was up over 14 for most of his career. So there's that. And then you add in, the Jackson Smith and Jigma catches, because that's part of it, is that I've got there being fewer receptions total because of more running, but more efficient ones, right? And so you've got to look at, who is he taking receptions from?
Mm-hmm.
Well, guys like Treadwell and
some of the tight ends, maybe.
Yeah, and some of the tight ends and some of those. But I'm like, if we can get him 55 receptions, which is a lot for a rookie.
I've got him at 65, but yeah.
But
and that's a lot. It is a lot.
But 55 receptions and for 700 yards.
And I've got him for 700 as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think I've got him for a little bit more yards per catch. And that's really where I when I was doing this, it was, how do we get, where are the yards per catch numbers? Because last year there was a lot of numbers that were lower than I expected when I started looking at this, because I didn't expect Metcalf to be down at under 12. That's just weird. He's usually up around 16 in his previous seasons. So part of that's Russell Wilson and his desire to throw deep on every play. And whereas this last year, it was much more methodical, much more efficient.
Within the offense. Yeah.
Yeah. But I do think that you're going to see, when you can run the ball better and you can protect your quarterback better, you're going to end up with longer receptions. And that is what I predicted as far as that is, that you see those numbers tick back up closer to where they've been.
So just throwing this in there. I had Noah Fant still at 45 receptions for 500 yards, 5 touchdowns. Statistically, he's about exactly where he was last year. So what all those stats did for me, Keith, was took our offense from averaging 23.9 points per game in 2022, jumped that all the way up to averaging 28 points per game in 2023 and 475 total points, which last year I believe we were 407.
Wow.
So it took us up nearly 75 additional points, and it equates to 5 points per game, in addition to over last year. That gave us 600 or 6,600 total yards and a final offensive ranking of third in the NFL.
Nice.
And I think this is realistic. I mean, when you take a look at ceiling, which
Mm-hmm.
all this is if everything goes really well. I think that we can expect statistics in these ranges that we're both talking about. I mean, we're really not that far off, just,
We're not.
adjusting buckets basically. I think that we can end up there at third in the NFL. And if that happens, Keith, this is going to be so exciting. What an offense to be able to watch week in, week out.
Yeah, yeah. And if they end up third overall in terms of total offense, Shane Waldron gets a head coaching job before the following season. Just throwing that out there. Because
He's
I
definitely
think
going to be in the conversation, no doubt.
because after what they did last year with Geno Smith at quarterback and no expectations and having to switch from Russell Wilson, and then if they go out and do what you and I think they're going to do this year, I do think he's going to be listed as a candidate, and that'll be interesting.
Well deserved. So I'm going to just stop you. Let's just talk final about the offense here. Um, this is a Super Bowl level offense
Yes,
that we're
yes,
talking
it
about.
is. Yep.
This is an offense that can get teams to a Super Bowl and win. So that's all I'm going to say about the offense. This team is only going to go as far as the defense goes. That was
Hmm.
evident out of this exercise that we did compiling these stats and so forth. So let's talk about defense.
Yeah.
Now I did the same thing that I did on the offensive side. I went ceiling on these stats for the most part, just because I wanted to, in this exercise, I wanted to try to elicit a best case scenario.
Yeah. I mean, I looked at this and I
And realistic, but best case.
semi-realistic. Yeah. I mean, you've got the for the defense, if the offense is third overall, if the defense
Exactly.
if the defense reaches the top half of the league, like 15th or better, then you've got a Super Bowl caliber team overall. And that's a big improvement. That's a massive improvement over last year, where they were 25th in points and 26th in yards. And yeah, it was bad. And then you look at third down conversions, and it wasn't much better. I mean, they were 27th in the league in third down conversion percentage. That just really low. And they've got to fix a lot of things in order to make this work. And so, yeah, I mean, what you end up with is this defense has to improve a lot in order for all of these things to happen, and we'll see if they get there. There's a lot of question marks. You're muted.
Sorry. I
There you go.
agree with you on the question marks, Keith. No doubt about it. And there are question marks. As we go through this exercise, I think we'll definitely have an opportunity to talk about all of those. And let's just kind of go through it. I had some individual stats and a whole bunch of team stats on this exercise. I'm not exactly sure where you're at, but we can start. How about sacks?
Um, okay. So like we can just scroll down because for me it was easier to just do like this. Sacks. Who has what? I've got Nuasu with 9, which is he was at 9.5 last year. I've got
I had him
Daryl.
with 12.
I've got Daryl Taylor with 9, which he was at 9.5 last year. And the reason for those dropping down is because I've got, Draymond Jones getting uh, 6, whereas Shelby Harris got 2, right?
Yeah.
So you have an improvement there. Um, and
Although I will
you've got,
say this, Shelby Harris ranked 4th in the NFL last year in pressure win
yeah,
rate.
yeah. So he was able to get pressure. He just didn't get home.
Correct.
Um, And, you look at that, like, Quentin Jefferson had 5.5. That's actually pretty good. But now you've got Reed in there who routinely gets that. And overall, just better talent there. So I've got Reed with 5, but basically you go through and you can spread out more. I mean, Boye Mafe
So
only
we're
had 3. I've got
so
him at
where
5.
where'd
So
you end up with total sacks? Last year we had 46 or 48.
I ended up with 54.
Wow.
And there's a
That's
category here of what did I put? Unallocated, because we'll see who
yeah.
comes through.
Well, let me ask you this. Now 54, Keith, would be top 5 in the NFL if I'm correct.
Yep.
So
So here's
pressure
here's
wise
why.
and sack wise, we're getting the job done
Uh,
better than we ever have. I think that would set a franchise record if I'm
yeah.
not mistaken.
No, I'll go back to 83. But the reason my thought process here is the offense is so good, the other team's going to be throwing the ball a lot. So there's going to be more opportunities, and they've got a lot of pass rushers.
See, this
And
is where the optimism comes in. This is where the ceiling stuff that I'm talking about that you're now talking about comes into play when we're allocating these things because of how good the offense is. It really does impact how this defense performs. I mean, they
Mhm.
go hand in hand and no more so than this season. It's crazy. I agree with you on the sacks and the distribution overall. And I think the top 2 are correct. And then we'll find out where everything else kind of lands to see Uchenna Nwasu again perform. I've got him at 12, and the reason that I had him higher than last year was because of the addition of Draymond Jones to take some of that pressure off, and the fact that Daryl Taylor had a great year last year, came on very strong. If he continues that from the beginning of the season this year, that's only going to make Uchenna Nwasu have less double teams and be able to get there even more. So I had him bumped up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense too. I spread it around more because now you're going to see more of Boye Mafe. You're going to see Derek Hall. You're going to see the guys up front get home a little bit more often. Um, and so yeah, I spread them out and then ended up taking some away from Nuwasu and Taylor, but that wasn't a sign that they're going to play worse. It just means that you only get credit if you're the first one there. And if somebody else beats you to the quarterback, well, they get the sack instead of you. So I think it's a great year for the pass rushers. I do, because and a lot of it has to do with Seattle um, offense and just putting points on the board and forcing other teams to throw.
I have a question
And
for you.
what
Where does Jamal Adams fit into that equation? Just
I
out of
have,
curiosity.
I don't have Jamal Adams fitting into any equation.
So your stats reaching 54 sacks is without Jamal Adams even having an impact.
Well, yeah, because I don't think he has an impact. And I don't mean that in terms of, oh, he's not going to play. Because even if he's out there and he plays, he may get some sacks, but he's taking those away from other people. And he's also giving up yards as in coverage, which will affect things in a negative way. And you know what I
Is
mean? And
is so your view is really mixed on Jamal. If Jamal comes in, he doesn't necessarily technically improve the overall defense.
no, I don't believe that he does. He's real. Part of it is that he's the best against the run, and or rushing the quarterback. And the other teams, I don't believe are going to be running that much because of Seattle having leads. Um, and he's not
The
good in
opposite, the opposite,
coverage. So
the opposite view of that is that there are no eyeballs on Jamal Adams. There are no teams scheming for Jamal Adams anymore. This defense is very diverse. It has a lot of weapons coming from all over the field, and the back end is superior. It could potentially leave Jamal Adams available to be a big time playmaker in this defense if all things were equal and if Jamal Adams was completely healthy. And that is yet to be proven. Obviously, I understand why you discount. I did too, to be completely honest. He doesn't factor in my equation either, but I thought about it as you were talking that we've got a whole bunch of potential stats sitting out there that are even not even accounted for with Jamal because we
Well,
can't
true.
depend on him.
If he's out there, then Julian Love isn't, right? And so then, and that's really the replacement that I made. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to give interceptions to Julian Love instead of tackles and sacks to Jamal Adams. One, because I trust Julian Love will be out there more, as far as that, but also because Adams is a guy that plays up in the box and does well against the run and basically does linebacker things, where Julian Love is actually a safety, who does safety things. And Adams is a safety by position and that kind of stuff. So they're asking him to do safety things. That actually hurts the defense.
Yeah.
And in a situation where the other team's throwing all the time, you need your safety to be able to do safety things. And I just didn't see it as a major um, reason to have him on the field all that much. And I know he will play and all of that, but I was just
Yeah.
trying to look at this in terms
Yeah.
of, yeah.
It's so hard. It's really hard. This is the wild card. Um,
hmm
and he's kind of the athlete on the defense, if you will. He moves around. They structure things around him and so forth. That'll be very interesting to see if he comes in healthy and has any impact because it could be wide open for him, or it could be a situation where you're right. He splits um, time with other players, and he really is diminished, and he's hardly a factor. So it could go either way. It'd be fascinating for me to see where he's at. Okay, so let's talk about Bobby Wagner's impact on this defense, Keith.
Well, so Bobby Wagner's impact, if I look at this, you start looking at tackles. Um, Jordan Brooks last year had 161 total tackles, 103 of them solo. And this was him not playing in the final game because of his injury and missing most of the game before that. Um, and so I look at that and I'm like, as far as the stats are concerned, I don't know if Bobby Wagner at this point in his career can match that. I think there's a step back there in terms of tackles and all of that. Um, but at the same time, what you gain with Bobby Wagner is the leadership qualities, the getting other people in position, the fact that he's a freaking captain of the defense and everyone looks and listens to him and his was it 7-time all pro selections and um that matters. It really does matter. And so I think statistically, which is what this show is about, I think you actually see a step back, but
Talk to me about
he
that.
makes it
What
there.
does that mean to you?
What do you mean?
Like 140 combined tackles? Is that a stretch, or you see less than that?
I think, so Cody Barton last year had 136 with 84 solos. Um, and I think that is actually a good spot for us to consider for Wagner.
Because I had him at 140 combined tackles, not an outrageous number,
Yeah.
kind of historically average for him. And I think that's about right where he's at. And I think it's a super fun season for him. So you talked about the leadership qualities of Bobby, absolutely true. But I think this could end up being a pretty special season for him on a number of reasons, only because the play up front in front of him is so much better. The sacks. I'm going to talk about turnovers in a minute. We'll talk about turnovers. I think that it just ends up being fun. Like this defense is going to be fun. Now, I don't know if it's going to be any good statistically on the final ranking, if you will, but it's not, to me, it's not going to be any worse than league average. I think by the time it's all said and done, I think we've added enough key components there where I think we get into that range. But there are a couple of key statistics, I think that point to the idea that it'll be a fun kind of take a few chances here or there, get those sacks, those big plays, get off the field on third down, get some interceptions, some forced fumbles, that sort of thing that turn this defense into something that's a little extra.
Yeah, I
Come
don't
on,
I don't
Keith, come
sh-
on.
I don't share that optimism. I think that here's what this defense does well. It'll cover well on the outside and um in the deep middle, and it will get pressure on the quarterback well. I don't think it can cover
That's a pretty good combo.
I don't think it can cover anywhere else. Um
Julian Love is excellent in coverage. I will say that. So I do
no,
see it improved, like
I
over
can
the middle, short yardage situations.
he's going to
We could be better.
he's going to
Kobe
have one
Bryant's got
guy.
another year. Trey Brown, we
Um
barely saw last year.
Yeah, like I said, I think the back end of the defense is going to be good. I think the pass rush is going to be good. I think they can't stop the run to save their life. And the middle of the defense as far as coverage is and the short yardage, like the stuff in the flats is going to be poor.
I will say this. I am disappointed. I am disappointed as of, the 20th of July, where we're at on stopping the run with this defense. If there is one thing that is glaring at me right now is how we are going to contain the run. Now, last year, believe it or not, this team was less efficient on stopping the run on the outside edges and getting around the edges and so forth. So any offense that we struggled with was a wide zone kind of team against the run. Now, stopping things up the middle, we were actually a little better at than I thought that we would be. But we also had Al Woods there, Puna Ford, and so forth. Those guys did a pretty decent job stopping things and gumming things up in the middle. And then on the edges is where we struggled. We just really didn't do anything other than add a couple of guys in the draft that hopefully kind of turn out. I mean, we did add Dre Jones, and he's pretty decent at stopping the run, but is he that much more efficient at stopping the run than Shelby Harris? I don't know. Maybe he is. And then we added Mike Morris, Jerron Reed, Cameron Young, Derek Hall, and then we added Bush, in free agency, and he's not known for, being an outstanding run defender. So I have a few question marks there at stopping the run, and this whole thing could really hinge on that because that's one of the Pete Carroll pillars on defense is making that first and foremost exactly what you want to be able to do, so you can force teams into being one dimensional with you. That's the part that might hurt. They could come up and surprise me, Keith, but as far as total sacks, I think you're generous at 54. I think points allowed comes down from 4. We were 401 last year. I think that comes down into the 365 range. It's still,
yeah, I've got them. I was thinking like 380.
They're still going to be in the middle of the pack as far as that is concerned. Total turnovers, I think, is the opportunity there is to be up. Now, if the offense doesn't turn the ball over, we could have one of the highest turnover plus minus percentages in the league. I think we have that opportunity. This could be a turnover machine defense, both on the back end and just forcing fumbles. And then total yards allowed. Last year we allowed 6,149 yards, ranked 26th. I've got them allowing 5,200 yards this year. So that's a huge improvement, but we were so bad last year that huge improvement really still only gets us to the middle of the pack. Last year we were at 23.6 points per game allowed. I've got us down to 20. That's significant, but it still only gets us into the ranking 12th to 15th in the league in total defense.
See,
I've
my
got us
problem with that,
optimistically ranked 12th, and that's what those statistics tell me that's where they would be. But I think it really does hinge on stopping the run, getting off
see,
the field on third down.
my problem with that is that when your offense is scoring at will,
Your
the
defense is
other
going to be
teams,
on the field more.
your defense is going to be on the field a lot, and other teams aren't going to be content with, you know, yeah, let's just, it's third and long. Let's just go ahead and run the ball and punt, and play the field position game or any of that. Like they're going to be going for it, and they're going to be going
Yeah.
for it from the beginning of the game, knowing that they've
Well,
got to
and
try and
that's
outscore
where
you.
our run game comes in. That's why Pete Carroll's a big run game guy. People don't really kind of understand that because it's hard. They see running the ball in a box, at a very narrow blinders on. When you take a look at the entire game of football, both offense and defense, how it all works together, that running game for Seattle really does impact the way the defense performs overall. And if we can keep them off the field,
Hmm.
that's an opportunity to improve. That's where I kind of thought about this is we're going to be a third to fifth ranked offense in this league with an improved running game and an improved efficiency with Gino and converting more third downs. This defense has an opportunity to improve just because of that.
See, I think
And so that's
statistically
where my
I think the defense may improve overall, but statistically, it can actually get worse because other teams
I
are.
think it's a time
I
of
mean,
possession thing. I don't
it's
agree with you.
because well,
I'll break from you on that.
what I'm trying to say on this is, um, and you've seen this in the past and you see it like with the Chiefs, right? Last year where they were throwing the ball around and just lighting up scoreboards. Other teams took more risks. They threw the ball deep more. They ended up connecting on some of those. And so statistically, that defense looked worse than it was because when other teams are throwing the ball deep all the time and you end up giving up something, or they're just throwing it instead of running the ball, and they're just doing things um, in more desperation to try and get down the field and get points, you end up giving up more yards. You end up giving up more points. You also end up getting more turnovers, and so the end result at the end of the game is the win. But you end up statistically having some struggles, even if it's not. You know what I mean? It's not. It's more of a mirage than anything. And I think when you look at it like statistically, I don't know if this defense is going to be significantly improved, but I think that be, based on the offensive stuff and what we're going to see, the next thing that we're going to talk about that we haven't yet is interceptions, is where the improvement shows up. Not in yards, not in and that kind of stuff, but in ways that they get
Turnovers,
off the
getting the ball
field.
back.
Yeah, and they're able to turn the other team over, get the ball back to the offense, and win games.
So there's two
And
areas that I wanted to talk to you about that actually out of this conversation is third down conversion rate and
mhm.
turnovers, because that's definitely an area where we're going to see improvement, I think, this year. It's just a question of how much.
Yeah. So let's see. As far as third down conversion rates, um, last year the Seahawks gave up 42.3% on third down, which was 27th in the league. Um, that's got to get better.
That's got to get
um,
better.
that's got to get
Absolutely.
better. And so if they need to get that number down to like 38%,
Did we add and improve on this defense enough to do that?
I don't know
Even
because
potentially. And
um
if so, where would it come from?
I like I said, I don't know because one of the things that you're going to see is if it's 3rd and 1, is this defense capable of stopping an opposing running back from getting that 1 yard?
I
I don't
think
think
they're
so.
gonna. I think that you're exactly right. And so, this team is going to be geared towards putting teams in third and long. Really, I mean, that's going to be the goal. I
Mhm.
don't know whether or not that's going to happen or not, but that will be a focus. So we'll see how that goes, because you're
If I'm
right.
an if
There's
I'm
not
an
much here
opposing
to
offensive
stop teams.
coordinator, if I'm an opposing offensive coordinator, I'm looking to my running game to get me into 3rd and short.
So if so, you're talking about teams methodically marching down the field, which has been an issue for this team, but it also, um, it keeps the ball out of the offense's hands, our offense. So
Mhm.
that's a twofold plus, for a team to try to do that to this team. Are we equipped to handle that?
I don't know. This team is built to get after the quarterback, cover, get interceptions. And that's a third and long, second and long.
Yeah.
Fourth quarter, 2-minute drill. I mean, that's they're built around that kind of stuff and winning games that way. But if a team wants to run the ball and put it together a 15 play drive, I think this team could really struggle. And that's why I have so much concerns over the defense.
I agree. That's the question mark. We talked about question marks up front when we started talking about the defense. That's it. To me is how do we stop the run and can we get off the field on third downs? Because
Mhm.
I think we're going to generate those turnovers. I think we're going to,
Yep.
those opportunities will be there. It's the stopping the run thing that I don't know exactly where we're at. Cameron Young could have a great season on the interior, and we could still really struggle in that regard if Trey Jones doesn't do his job. If Taylor, isn't doing his job. If a guy like Mike Morris doesn't come on or Derek Hall, guys that we're going to depend on for, playing 30% of the snaps, don't have solid seasons, this team's going to struggle
Yeah,
in that
and
regard.
it's and
And it won't improve. We had the same issues last year. I'm a little concerned that we didn't address that enough. But
yeah, I mean they there was like a wholesale change on the defensive line. Um and I think that's them attempting to recognize the problem and make changes. Um they just, in my opinion, they didn't add enough. It's like they changed, they've got different names, but where's the increased production? I mean, Dre
well,
Jones
they certainly added
over
enough on the
Shelby
pass
Harris,
rush.
sure. But Cameron Young over Woods and Ford in the middle, I don't know. I mean, I hope so. And he's a rookie, and I actually want him to have a great year and be kind of that mainstay in the middle, the way Poona Ford's been the last
Yeah,
6 years.
that's why I said he
Um,
could have a great year and still not have a huge effect on stopping the
yeah.
run for this defense.
So we'll see. It is a question. So we didn't do interceptions. Do you have
Yeah,
interception, like, because Treek Woolen
yeah.
had 6, led the
I
NFL.
didn't have total interceptions or total turnovers. I kind of left that open because I wanted to have a conversation. I wanted to see where you were at.
Yeah, well, I didn't. Fumbles are so random.
Like Kobe
That I
Bryant had 4 forced fumbles last year,
Yeah,
but he could have 0 this year. Who knows?
yeah. Um, and so I'm like, okay, interceptions are much more. Um, they're less
Predictable.
random and more like they're more skill based, right? Both on the pass rush end and um by the people in coverage. Treek Woolen had 6 last year. That led the or tied for leading the NFL with a bunch of people.
Yeah, I
Um,
had him at 7 this year. Actually,
I'm like
I
somewhere
did write that
between.
down.
I was like 5 to 7, so I put him at 6 again, which would again have him up near the top. Quandre Diggs had 4, um, and that's been where he's kind of been his
Yep,
entire time here.
yep,
I think that's safe to put him there. And then after that, it was Cody Barton with 2, Michael Jackson with 1, Ryan Neal with 1.
yeah.
That's it.
So
Nobody else
yeah,
had
but
any.
now you've added Witherspoon. You've got
Yep.
Kobe Bryant in his next year. I think Kobe Bryant
True.
has underrated ball skills. He just didn't have them turn into turnovers last year. And
Mhm.
then you add
Julian
in
Love.
Julian Love. And
Yep.
so I think interceptions
And you
overall go up
and
quite a
you
bit.
add in an improved pass rush and teams throwing the ball
Yeah, trying
deep
to come from
and into
behind.
coverage more.
Yeah.
And so I think overall, like, Woolen and Diggs are probably going to be about the same. Diggs might get, more because of their more deep shots. But you're going to see, instead of Michael Jackson's 1, you're going to see Witherspoon get 3 or 4. Instead of Ryan Neal's 1, you should see Julian Love get like 3, maybe 4. Right? Instead of Cody Barton's 2, you're gonna see it spread out over the linebackers you're gonna see, 5 out of all the linebackers. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing, especially
Right.
Bobby. Bobby tends to get 2 or
Right.
3 a year. Um, and so
Yeah. And you got guys that aren't going to play much, like Jarek Reed and Trey Brown, that are capable. So
yeah.
yeah, I see a large improvement there, really.
Yep. So that's where I see the improvement in the defense. I think statistically they're gonna be they're gonna have more sacks, they're gonna have more interceptions, and therefore the team's going to win more games because the defense will have gotten off the field in
Yes, and
times when
giving
they
that ball
wouldn't
back
have
to
in the
the offense.
past. Um, but I think when you start looking at the counting stats, the yards, that kind of stuff, it may be right similar to where they were last year, but that doesn't mean they're not improved.
I do believe that because of all that we just talked about, it does impact that total yards allowed and total points. I really do. I mean, you give the ball back even one more time a game to that offense, and the likelihood that they get in field goal position to score that extra 3 points, which I allocated to them. They have 5 more points on offense this year than last year. I think some of that comes because of those turnovers,
Hmm.
and getting the ball back. So I think overall, that's my thing is when I do the prediction show in September, I take a look at all this kind of stuff and I'm thinking, okay, if we've got a top three offense and we've got a top 15 defense, maybe pushing top 10, get into that 12th, 13th,
Mm.
14th ranked overall defense, I think it's possible, Keith. Now
I
we
think they're
talk
going to
about
be
impacting
20,
stopping the run,
20th
but look at the
is,
turnover machine we are. We
but
could
that's the
lead the
thing is,
league in turnovers on this defense.
no, and I agree with that. Like that's what I mean. Like I think statistically, when you look at the counting stats like yards and that kind of stuff, they're not going to be good. 20th might be the ceiling, but that doesn't equate to not winning games and not being better. Because yeah, they give up the yards, but then they get the big turnover when the team needs it, and they win the game. The defense is better suited to help them win, even if they're not better suited to win a statistical category.
So Ben,
That's
but
more
oh,
what I'm
right.
trying to say, is
Yeah.
that statistically it may not look better, but it will be better because of their ability to get turnovers.
I think, and I'm going a step further. I just say that with that ability to create turnovers, the statistics look better because we're getting the ball out of the opposing offense's hands more, and eliminating drives against that defense. Those happened last year. I also believe that we take small incremental steps forward overall as a defense in just the ability to get off the field on third down,
I
without
don't know.
generating a turnover. And
That's
so
been a problem in the past with more talented defenses in
yeah, I just
Seattle.
think we force teams into more third and longs, and that's why we force teams more into third and longs because of our pass defense. And on third and longs, we have the ability to bat down passes, knock down passes, all that kind of stuff, or get to the quarterback. And so I think statistically we improve
See, I
based
don't
on
know if we
just those
get
things.
more. I don't know if we end up more third and longs because opposing teams are going to run on Seattle, and they're going to get that 4.5 yards per carry average and be in
I
third
think
and short a lot.
I think that's certainly a philosophy that I would open up games against Seattle with. But I think that goes out the window as soon as Seattle scores 10 to 17 points on teams in the first quarter.
Yeah.
I think it goes out the window really fairly quickly. And so I think teams end up jettisoning the run game. Even though it's successful, it just takes too long to put points on the board against a high potent powered offense like Seattle. And teams throw that out the window early in games and go for the pass. And they plays right into our hands. I think that's the
Yeah.
plan, really.
Cool.
Okay. So overall, overall, where do you think Seattle, you said 20th potentially. So going from 20th to 26 last year overall ranking to 20th,
Hmm.
a marked improvement, but not enough really to kind of get this team further deeper into the playoffs.
I think with the offense the way it is, and when it comes down to is do they get the key turnover in the playoffs, not just in the regular season games. If they get that key turnover in the playoffs, 20th will be good enough. Um, you're just expecting the team to get it, over uh, every game in the playoffs. And I don't know if you come up short on one, then that's where your exit is. But I could see this being a deep run, but not Super Bowl based on the defense. The offense is Super Bowl ready. It at least on paper it is. It looks Super Bowl ready. The defense does not. The
I am
defense needs
super,
another
super,
year.
super, super interested in how this plays out. I'm also very interested in how our listeners and watchers view this because it is a very nuanced argument when we're talking about all these kind of stats and what stats affect points scored and turnovers and when they happen and sacks and how that translates into points on offense. And it's kind of wonkish. I mean, we talked about at the beginning of the show having this thing be a little wonkish as far as the statistics are concerned. You can get deep into the weeds, and we did. And hopefully people stuck with the show and got something out of that, because it's a great conversation. It really is. It really gets into the heart of how well this team's going to perform this year and what we can expect from them. And I think we're pretty darn close. I mean, we've done this many times, and we've been deep into this team for a long time. And so we have a pretty good idea of how these things generally end up turning out. And I think we're pretty spot on for the most part. So I'm just curious how now this translates into the record. And we will talk as we get real close to the beginning of the season about our prediction overall. And this will play into it for sure. All right, let's get out of here. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NWChawk. Also on the new app Threads. If anybody cares to look at that, I'm at Bill Alvstad on Threads. And then you can find the show at on any of your favorite podcast platforms and our YouTube channel as well. So when you get there, hit that subscribe button, and we'll be in your feed every week after that. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWChawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.